Britain has started placing asylum seekers on a giant barge called the Bibby Stockholm. 15 men have arrived, but the capacity is actually for 500. Activists warn that conditions on board are likely to deteriorate, and the Fire Brigades Union called the vessel a death trap. So, is this part of a deliberate policy to make Britain hostile to immigrants? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. It's great to have your company. Now, the British government says putting asylum seekers on a giant barge will cut the cost of paying for hotels while their claims are processed. The Home Office described the Bibby Stockholm as a forceful message that for immigrants arriving, there will be proper but not luxurious accommodation. Already, some asylum seekers have refused to even go on board. Here's how TRT World's Simon McGregor-Wood reported on those first arrivals.
It was brought alongside this location just over my left shoulder behind me 3 weeks ago, and we were expecting the first of up to 500 migrants to arrive almost immediately. I think at the heart of the problem is the fact that the government has insisted on almost doubling, in fact more than doubling, the capacity of the barge from 220 to over 500. They say they are committed to putting over 500 people, all single males between the age of 18 and 65, on board by the end of the summer, by the beginning of autumn. This has been used before for similar purposes by German authorities to house migrants temporarily. It's also been used in the past to house oil and gas workers working in the North Sea. We understand that about 50 people are due to be on board by the end of the week. But as I say, government ministers also insisting that 500 will eventually be housed here by the autumn.
Well, let's meet our guests in Manchester. Gulwali Pasarleh, a former refugee and author of The Lightless Sky, an Afghan refugee boy's journey of escape to a new life in Britain. Joining us from Oxford, Peter Walsh, a researcher in migration at Oxford University's Migration Observatory. And in Oxfordshire, Navid Farzi, Services Director at Asylum Welcome. Hello to you all. Before we speak about this, I want to hear from Sarah Dines, who is a British government minister. She's in the Home Office, and this was her reasoning behind the barge in the first place.
What it sends is a forceful message that there will be proper accommodation, but not luxurious. Luxurious hotel accommodation has been part of the pull, I'm afraid. There have been promises made abroad by the organised criminal gangs and organisations which are trying to get people into the country unlawfully. And they say you'll be staying in a very nice hotel in the middle of a town in England. That needs to stop. And the barge is just one of a wide range of other measures.
Gulwali, I want to start with you. Just to what degree is this whole policy about putting people off coming to Britain in the first place?
Yes, indeed. I mean, this is nothing new. The British government has been trying to do this for years, trying to be as hostile as it can be to the policies of deterrence, deportation, detention has been in play. You know, the hostile environment has been there. So this idea of people being in hotels, these hotels are terrible. These asylum seekers doesn't want to be in this hotel. They've been put in there purposely by the government to make us all angry because the government doesn't want to work on the backlog. It's not that the numbers have increased drastically, even though it has been in the last 2 years or so, but it's the issue of incompetence. The immigration minister recently said the reason he's not dealing with the backlog is because more people will come. So not clearing backlog is clearly government strategy and basically making us all angry that the hotels is costing £6 million. There's a backlog of 150,000 people. We are being overwhelmed in this language of invasions and dehumanization and criminalization. So this is nothing new for me, and I'm not surprised. And what Sarah says is completely untrue. People don't come here for our hotels accommodation, and I can guarantee you this hotel accommodation is not somewhere that you and me would want to stay, particularly this asylum accommodation. Also, the asylum accommodation that we have in the community is not even fit for purpose. There are about 6,000 homes through these private agencies and companies that the border inspectors consecutively been saying for the last 10 years that are not fit for purpose. It's inadequate, but it's better than the hotels. But the reason that is not available is because of the backlog. So ultimately, it's the government failures, incompetence in dealing with the situation rather than blaming it on refugees and asylum seekers. And,
Peter,
this whole barge situation trying to
Peter,
deter
would you
people
agree,
to work.
Peter, that this is yet another scare tactic from the British government? You know, you don't want to be coming here. Look where we'll send you.
It's certainly wholly consistent with the government's approach to dealing with irregular migration and small boat arrivals in particular. We think most recently about the Illegal Migration Act and the Rwanda scheme. Those are explicitly presented as deterrence policies, so it's entirely consistent with that. But actually, the government has said it's about something else as well, and that's cutting costs. They've said that this will be considerably cheaper than housing individuals in hotels, but they have yet to release the financial documents that say exactly how much this will be. So it's going to be very interesting to see exactly how much it costs the government to bring this barge to the UK, to retrofit it, and how much the per person costs will be. But the government has not published that information yet.
Navid, I want to bring you in. Do you think this is all about the optics again, to show people, you know, it's an unpleasant place to be put? You don't want to be coming here. You don't want to be staying on this barge.
Let me give you an example. Yesterday, we had a client from Afghanistan who is 16 years old. This young man has been in this country for 2.5 months. He has gone through 3 different hotels, 2 in London and 1 in Oxford, Kassam Hotel, where there are about 230 asylum seekers residing. This boy has been put in 3 different places without going through a proper age assessment to identify his age, and currently has been allocated with a 33-year-old man and a stranger, God knows where come from. We have been struggling to work with local government in order to put him through a proper age assessment. There is no response because they say he needs to go back to the previous local government where he resides in 2 different boroughs in London in 2 different accommodations. This is the kind of rhetoric the government is trying to put out there to public, to say people are coming to this country to live in middle England in luxury hotels, while people are struggling with £9 per week, with mental health condition, and these people are going through a hell of a problem for few months until they get down here, and we end up with a government who is playing and preying on British public, especially people with less of income or unemployed, to tell them that asylum seekers, migrants, and refugees are the burden and come in here to abuse the current benefit system in this country, which is not on. I think when you listen and look around, and especially if you are working with people on the ground, you feel so much anger and you share it with a large part of the British public about the government's ill judgment, about the government rhetoric and anti-immigration and anti-asylum bill, as it was described previously. The government has already done everything they can do in order to bring different bill, different legislation in, but I'm not quite sure if they get anywhere. They claim that this is a cheaper, sending people to barge is going to be cheaper. As it was said, the government has to release the bill and tell people how much it costs. They already struggle with what is happening within the public, within the asylum system. They don't have enough staff to deal with it. Even though the British Prime Minister, the ministers are lining up on TV, on media, telling the British public that we are here to support you. They're wasting people's public's time, public's money, paying £6 million per day to private agencies, while asylum seekers are living on £9 per week in this country. This is a shameful position that any government in this country would have ever occupied.
Gulwali, I want to hear about your story. Tell us how you came to Britain and how determined you were to make that journey.
I came to the UK at a very young age. I came here as an unaccompanied minor back 16 years ago. I was about age 13. I went through this hostile situations where my age was disbelieved by social services. As Navid mentioned about this young man, I was age disputed for a few years. The Home Office criminalized me, penalized me, and treated me quite badly. They didn't believe my nationality, that I was an Afghan national. It took about 2-3 years to challenge that, and I was able to be fostered and go through school. So things that worked out for me at the end, but it took me 5 years to get my refugee status. So this idea of deterrence was in play back in 2007. as it is now. But I mean, the government has become quite right wing, and the language they use is the language of the very right wing that was not in play at the time. There was a culture of disbelief. There was the hostility, the hostile environment, but not so much so the laws. Now we have anti-refugee legislation, which breaks international laws, which breaks humanitarian laws, as well as our, the convention that we have signed up to, and it's morally wrong. In this barge situation, even if the barge was safe, it's still wrong to be putting asylum seekers and refugees who have gone through trauma, who have left countries because they were persecuted because of their situation back home in Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, Syria, and other places. We shouldn't be putting people who come here to seek sanctuary and protection in a barge because we think they're a threat, or we think we need to put them somewhere cheaper. We need to be accommodating them in normal accommodation. We need to be supporting and helping them in upholding our moral standards and in their human rights.
Peter, how much is this policy about playing to the support base of the Conservative Party in Middle England?
Yeah, I think that could be quite a substantial part of it in the run-up, of course, to a general election, probably at the end of next year. I mean, there's a sense in which the messaging is an important part of this, what's sometimes referred to as the symbolic policy making of government. And we think that that may apply here. Also, of course, the Rwanda scheme. And what makes people think that is that at the moment, Rwanda says it has capacity for about 200 individuals. That would represent a very small share of a regular asylum entrant, suggesting the chance of being sent to Rwanda, unless capacity is substantially scaled up, is very small, which of course raises questions again about the likely deterrent effect of this policy. But certainly people do view it in part as sending a message not only to migrants and would-be asylum entrants, but also the great British public.
Navid, critics have called this barge policy cruel and inhumane. What do you make of that? Would you agree?
Let's get back to people who are coming to be living in this country or seeking asylum in this country. Some of them are going to be in hotels, some of them are going to be at the barge. What type of people these people are? Who are they? Where they come from? Almost 2/3 of people who are seeking asylum in this country are coming from Iraq, Afghanistan, Iran, Sudan, Syria, Eritrea, you name it. These people have already gone through a hell of a trauma, a hell of a problem, and by the time they arrive here, are mentally disturbed. Then even when they come and we allocate them to hotels, so-called hotels, with that £9 per week, with not enough nutrition, I will tell you about nutrition later, and you just imagine you put a group of people who has more or less now understanding of where they come from, with now understanding about language, with now understanding about legal system, about immigration system in this country, now access to legal aid to get a representative, and now access to mental health experts, and also proper GP and hospital. Then you put this group of people in that shape and call them, we are providing them with proper accommodation. I think this is something that I can't see how this history is going to describe for the new generation. I think the British government is doing something that has not written and not prescribed anywhere on the planet. What they are telling people is, you go there, you are safe, and we can't afford to pay £6 million per day for accommodated asylum seeker. Let me give them a quick example of what is happening. As I say, 2/3 of these people will never ever be back to their country of origin. No matter how they arrive here, no matter how we are going to treat them, there is no way that the British government is going to send someone back to Afghanistan, to Iran, to Syria, to Sudan, to Eritrea. And therefore, what I am asking for is simple. For those people who are not criminal, who haven't committed crime, and we are not aware about the criminalities and there is no information, give them 2-3 years leave to remain, get them off the hook, let them go and find their way, let them go and start working. There are solicitors, there are nurses, bricklayers, workers, what you name it among these people. These people had a life. These people were working. Now you are going to put them in hotels and bars for how long? 2 months, 3 months, 2 years, 3 years? Let them off the hook. Let them go and find treat them with dignity, treat them, if you are hiding yourself behind the British public, of defending the British public interest.
Gulwali, can I ask you, Gulwali, £6 million a day of taxpayers' money is being spent on hotels for asylum seekers. You could argue the government really has run out of options, you know, that they don't have any other ideas.
But the government has put themselves in this situation. And also the 6 million figure I've learned recently, this is not really the money that's supposed to be spent on other things. This is the foreign aid budget. So basically the government has been using the 0.7% that we're supposed to give in foreign aid. For example, they cut budget to Afghanistan by 60-70% because of the Taliban takeover and so on and so forth. Although we have a humanitarian crisis in the country there, they're using 0.2% of the foreign aid budget supporting these hotels accommodation. So it's not, yes, it's the British public's money, but that was supposed to be for foreign aid. So in a way, what they're doing is quite concerning anymore in itself, that they're not using some borrow money or some taxation money. They're using money which was supposed to be going the 0.7% that the UK usually gives to poorer countries. And I think the British government have many options. We need the British government to act with compassion, act with humanity. As Naveed says, look, they spend far too much time on deterrence and policies and laws to make people's life more difficult, to keep people in limbo. This budget will not solve the problems. Putting 500 people there, making their life more miserable. More and more asylum seekers will come. We can deal with them. We've been getting about 30,000 asylum seekers a year. It's perfectly normal. France had 3 times more than that. Germany has 7-8 times more than that. So it's like this idea where the furthest in Europe, people should go anywhere, but here doesn't make sense. This is not how international law works. This is not how the international refugee protection system works. So the UK needs to take its responsibility or its fair share of refugees seriously, you know. And this, we have the Afghan resettlement scheme in name only. We still have Afghans stranded in hotels, which is costing us another million. That's another story. We have 8,000 Afghans stranded in hotels 2 years down the line when they were supposed to be a warm welcome. So this issue of asylum seeker this has happened because of the government's incompetence and failure in dealing with the situation and granting people status. For example, Afghans can't be sent back. Why are you putting people in limbo? Why can't you make decisions and give people status? So if they're not supposed to be here, although I disagree with deportation as a human rights campaigner and as a refugee rights advocate, but, you know, if there's a system in place, the government needs to take the public into confidence and say, look, things are under control, not use languages like, you know, bunch of migrants and people are invading us, they're our enemy, and, you know, they're here to cause us harm. The government
you mentioned those numbers. You mentioned those numbers. Other countries are indeed seeing far more asylum applications than the UK. We can take a look at those figures now. Germany last year, almost 300,000 applications in Germany. France, 179,000. Spain, 128,000. All of these, Peter, dwarf the UK. Britain seems to be doing more than other European countries when the bare facts are that's not the case.
Yeah, it's not clear. That's absolutely true. And some people go a step further and they say, actually, we shouldn't look only at the absolute numbers, but adjust them for population size, because that gives some indication of a country's ability to take asylum seekers. And when you do that, comparing the UK with the EU, we fall from about 5th place to 20th place. So for sure, there is a disconnect between the inordinate focus on the issue and actually its magnitude relative to that seen in other countries.
Navid, reducing migration is a key policy for this British government, but they're obviously failing. We've seen 15,000 people arrive on small boats so far this year from beaches in northern France. I mean, what's your take on the policy they should be pursuing? Because quite clearly, what's happening right now is not working.
The British government is in a position where more than any other European countries who are taking a sort of a lion's share of people seeking asylum or migrants coming to Europe and deal with them more or less in a more human way. The British government, I'm afraid I have to say, has so far failed to meet the basic respect for human rights and the obligation that this country has signed up with. There is no way this country or any other country is going to get away with this. This is a problem. This is a world global problem. We have created an environment where people found it extremely difficult to live, and people will be migrating. People will be fleeing and reaching out to safety. And when they arrive here, I think the best way is we are screaming out for workforce to come and work for us. And we got about 140, 150,000 people young people, people who are ready to take employment, and keeping them like that, like in prison, and not to taking advantage of what we got here.
Peter, just on those numbers, the average wait for an asylum judgment in the UK is 15 and a half months. In Austria, it's 3 months. It's Germany, 6.5 months. Why is the backlog? I'm sure Boris Johnson would say this is world-beating, no doubt. But in all honesty, why is the system so backwards in Britain?
Actually, it's worse than that. I just calculated the figures, the most recent figures, and in 2022, the average time that a person waited was 21 months for that initial government decision. So much greater than our EU neighbours, who are actually receiving more applicants. There's no single or even clear explanation as to why we're taking so long, but our immigration inspector did look at asylum processing, wrote a report, and the findings were very interesting. He found that there was an over-reliance on antiquated IT systems, use of Excel sheets rather than a bespoke system for processing and recording decisions on claims. It also found very low morale amongst the asylum decision-making staff, and that's key because it's led to high staff turnover. And that's a big problem, because it takes anywhere from a year to a year and a half to gain full proficiency when you're making those asylum decisions. And simply people are leaving long before then.
Gulwali, you came to this country as a refugee. If you were told you're being put on this barge, would you have gone on board?
I think I have friends there now actually going on board. They were told they don't have choice. They have to go, otherwise they will lose the support they get, which is the basic accommodation and the £9 or so a week. And then people are scared. People are worried this will impact their asylum plans. So people have been kind of bullied into this, and people are worried that if they don't go, they will have negative consequences. And also, as an asylum seeker, you have no choice where to live. Normally, you are dispersed anywhere. You kept in any hotels or any asylum accommodation, no matter how bad and good this is. But this is a new thing. You're putting people in a prison-like condition. You're denying them their freedom. You're basically treating them as criminals and as people that need to be away from society. So I have a friend there who has been kind of reporting back to me and telling me how things are. And I've been asking him, he said, look, he feels really disheartened. He feels disappointed. He thinks he's been made an example of. The 15 people who went, and a lot of people have refused to go because they feel like they've been punished for something that they have not done. It's the government's policies to show that how terrible things are and how people are unwelcome. They really feel unwelcome. They feel unwanted. They
Navid,
feel powerless to do anything.
Navid, can I ask you, if you were speaking to Rishi Sunak today or the Home Secretary Suella Braverman, what would your brief message be to them?
I would simply tell them to show some humanity, respect for human beings, and also understand what is really happening with people. Why should someone like me and any other people who has a life, who contribute so much, who has never committed a crime, they should be living, they should be forced out of their country of origin and come and seek asylum elsewhere. No human being on the planet would live with no reason, especially with those who are fleeing war, persecutions, and also torture and killing from their country of origin. So the British government, Rishi Sunak, and anyone else who is in charge need to look back. How on earth they will be going back to their families, look at either their children and wife or husbands at the same time, going away with so many thousands of people who are traveling to this country by boat or other means of traveling and are drowned, and their identity, their life, their presence will never ever be identified anywhere or recognized anymore.
Peter,
how would someone hold himself to the position?
Peter, I want to end on a
Peter,
I want to end on a cartoon that was in The Guardian this week, which sums it all up for a lot of people. It features Rishi Sunak and Suella Braverman, and the message is, stay away or you will be sent to a miserable remote island. I mean, the joke is that this is what the Conservative government are trying to turn Britain into, isn't it?
That's the clear implication, but whether it's going to have much impact is quite unclear. There is some research on deterrence policies of the kind that the government has pursued, and it suggests that they're not all that effective. They don't have a big impact. And that's because a great number of people who are thinking of making the trip don't have a detailed knowledge of the policies that are likely to await them on their arrival. The reason that they come to the UK is because of the presence of family members, members of the community, friends. It's because of the English language, and maybe, third most importantly, a perception that the UK is safe, democratic and welcoming, something that the government seems to be trying to dismantle.
Well, Gulwali, Peter and Navid, thanks for your time. Our time has come to an end. It's certainly a debate that is going to run and run in the United Kingdom. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Search for Roundtable TRT World. But for now, from me and Brady and all the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.